Welcome, my name's Chris, and I'm back this week with another installation of my chord family series. This time it's going to be on key of D, and I'm going to be covering 1, 4, and 5, which is D, G, and A. This is really focused for especially beginner and intermediate guitarists that are finding their chords stale and want some different sounds for the guitar. They want resonant chords that really work well together, and more importantly, you might want to start thinking more contextually musically. As a guitarist, not thinking about putting in chords just kind of static and copying and pasting them into songs, but really having a toolkit here that you can get some great sounds for yourself as you play songs, and also learn tunes. You'll be able to recognize these sounds more. I find myself playing these voicings of these specific chords all the time, and they're definitely in between the lines. They're not taught enough. They're definitely not the kind of typical ways you would think to play these. So I will just jump in here. Consult the chord chart in the description. I will link that. This whiteboard's mainly for me, but I'll have all these chords there laid out, and I hope you can find one that you love. Every one of these keys has a certain sound. So if you play guitar long enough, you figure this out, right? So you figure out that the D chord has all this stuff that goes with it. All this kind of context, right? It's like stuff we can only do at the D chord house, right? We can put our feet up on the table or whatever. It's fine there, but not fine in another house. So there's all this context. So that's what we're trying to build up here, is an intuition about not only the key of D, what can I do on the guitar physically, but then relaying that to numbers. So this, whatever we can do here, is equivalent to whatever we do in C on a C chord, which is going to be different. And that's equivalent to what we do on a G chord. And all these different key centers on guitar that are really more popular and prominent and resonant and sound good. So for the D chord, the typical one's great. The voicing that you get on a certain chord on guitar is kind of accidental and just based on what is possible to play. So this voicing of a D chord has a third on top, and it's really bright and pretty. And this sounds great, but you could also exclude the thinnest and get this more pointed no third in there. So that's really nice too. You can even include the A string, like I just accidentally did. But don't feel like you always have to do just a D chord. You can take off the thinnest, open, D sus2, or D sus4. Those little movements are just common, and you don't have to wait for them. You can just do them whenever you want, right? But going on to the second one, drop D. So this is a lot of people's entrance into alternate tunings if you've never done anything outside of standard. So what we're doing is lowering the thickest to D, and I think I'm already down there. I am. So you can use the D. Here, I'll just go up to standard real quick just to show you. So here's standard. And I can use this D string as a guide. And you can get really quick at this eventually. Pretty in the ballpark, right? So now I get this D chord, which if I'm in the key of D, I tend to use drop D. Not all the time, but if I have the time to tune, why not, right? You just get this beautiful pad of D, right? The D is so much more supported. So I really dig this. This is a huge resource we can use in the key of D, or playing key of D capoed up, okay? And there'll be songs you'll hear that have this sound, and you can tell they're in drop D, right? So it might be D minor even, or kind of somewhere in between major and minor, but we're just focusing on major today. Okay, so drop D, no thinnest is the other part of that. So you can just focus on this D. This is done a lot, right? That sound. So it's just really direct, and that's the melody there of the chord, if you will. And then we have that full bright D, which is also great. Okay, and then the next one, drop D, low third. So if you take the third here, this is an octave shape that's good to know about on guitar. But if we take this down from here to here, and this octave shape goes on the D in the thinnest, and also the A and the B string. That's an octave too. Cool, and then on the next one, it's not an octave. A little different on that. What would it be? Yeah, it's 3 frets, not 2 frets. So anyways, getting back to this. We have this, lowering this down and keeping the other 2 of the D gets us this chord, which is beautiful, right? 4, 2, and 3 on the D, G, and B. And I'm not really playing the thinnest. You could. That's really nice. Not totally in tune, but good enough. That's not the point. Really nice, and I typically will play this with the muted thinnest. So just, I love that warmth in that, and it's really subtle. This might be a great chord to end a song on, right? Or if you're finger picking, you could do stuff like picking some of these fingers up like I've talked about in the past. I think on the key of C video, I talked a lot about that. And you get all this beautiful, all this possibility of finger picking parts or lead parts, or making a song really unique and have its own kind of autonomy. Okay, so there's the drop D with the lowered third. Now we get to drop D with no fifth. Actually, I had to stop this video and restart it because I totally blanked on what I meant by that. It just kind of totally threw me off. It was funny. So this is kind of coming from the key of G. We referenced this sound. But if I don't include the fifth, you can even just take this shape. And if I pick up the second fret G string, which is the fifth, in this case A, if I just pick that up, I can add the 4. And we saw this kind of sound and shape, and the C chord moved up 2 frets. It's a very similar thing, right? You can just take this off. You can play that, or you can play an open A there. Really beautiful, right? And I wouldn't use this all the time, but sometimes this might be the feature of the sound, meaning it's kind of like, something like that, right? Where I just kind of hold that and I'm harmonizing it with notes in the bass. And with the thinnest open, that's nice. You could include other notes. Right, so pretty. And this is, drop D allows us to get a little bit more creative up the neck, which we'll see in 1 second. Okay, so that's no fifth in there. We call that D add 4, but just, well, you can call it whatever you like. And then bonus, if you can see it down there, D up the neck. So just like I said a second ago, having open roots really gives us the opportunity to move around the neck a lot more. So if you take this D chord, you could use this if you're getting into lead guitar playing or more theory and fretboard knowledge. What if I could find another triad shape of D? Like this is second inversion, and then here's a root position, 7, 7, 5. And then finally up here we have 11, 10, 10. So I could do a lot with that, right? I could do a lot of pretty sounds. I could take this shape and move it to like A, G, right? So there's all this pretty movement you can do. I could just kind of get creative. I could play, that's a song. That's stuck in my head. It's also, I just taught a song on Something by the Beatles. That's the same progression. But lots of movement here, right? So get kind of creative. Move up this D chord. If you move up just this shape, if you're starting out, up to G, or 7, 8, that's a G chord. A chord. 3 B chords, right? Same exact shape. Why not move it around? And just try to kind of think a little bit more outside the box with this D being this big pad. So I played a tune by Julian Lage that I love called Gardens, and he uses this idea in drop D. He plays stuff like, he kind of uses the D is kind of a pedal, just staying under the chord, and it kind of colors everything, and it can serve as our band almost, right? I could solo, and I could go to another chord, but as long as the chord's a D, I've got that D sound. You know, I could move this. I could have a lot of riff kind of bass stuff here. Intervals, there's a lot you can do, right? Or triads. Okay, and then finally, that's it. That's it for D. Just to review real quick. So we have a typical D chord. That sounds great. I use this a lot in standard tuning. If I'm playing in the key of D, I tend to go to drop D if I have the time. And then we get into the second one, drop D with maybe the no thinnest thing, right? Or I play all these, right? They all blur together in real life. The next one, D, drop D, lower third. Really like this one. Okay, and drop D, no fifth. That is where we take this one up. So pretty, right? You can add notes to it. And finger picking through these and playing separate notes really teaches you about them, right? It teaches your ear how they work, and you'll hear them in other songs. Finally, D up the neck. So just talking about maybe keeping the three thickest open and playing stuff up the neck. I'll do a song tutorial on this sometime. Random song, but it's so fun to play. Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon, I believe. That's just coming to me because I use this trick when I played that for a gig one time. It was just me. So I was thinking, how do I get the vibe of the song in there? So I did drop D, and then I think it's maybe capo 1 with the recording. It's like E flat, or maybe C sharp. So we're not trying to play the recording, but I just did it in drop D, in the key of D. And I went like, and played that little line at the beginning, but now I've got the band, right? I can go, and kind of play both of that, and then I can go to chords, right? But so great to have this really full drop D sound. And good practice to get out of the box with standard tuning. Tiny note on drop D, none of the normal chords work. But again, this is all contextual. Oh, I say that. None of the normal chords using thickest string would work. So a G is out like this, right? No longer G, right? But that's cool. It's all contextual. That's how music works. It's how our brains work. Thankfully, it all works together, right? Okay, so there's the D chord. So going on to the G chord. I'll pick up on the context thing really quick. Think about the G chord in the key of D differently than G chord in key of G, right? Because the number is different. So the 4 chord's totally different from a 1, and you're going to hear and feel it and handle it differently. So in the key of G, I'm just going to go up to, in the key of D. Keep my keys straight here. Good enough? So if I'm in the key of D, no drop D. Now just standard chords. So I would probably say that the G5, this one, sorry, I'm not quite in tune, but trying to get close enough. We'll talk about that tuning method too, that's like harmonic tuning. It tends to be quicker at the higher notes, and you can hear them, and you can use 2 fingers, or sorry, have a hand free to move the tuner. So something's in there that's weird, but that's okay. Okay, so we have G5, and I'm just saying this one because of the D note is in this chord versus like a 2-finger G. So a 4-finger G is really nice move, right? And that keeps this resonance down. It keeps my my 1 chord sounding really nice. So that's done all the time. Maybe it's my thickest. So that harmonic thing works a few times, right? Just a little flat. But good practice to do this during a video. Close enough. I'll try to work on it throughout what we play. So G5 really goes to that D. Right? And I can feel that. That's the whole point of this, right? I can really feel it. I'm building in the effort into like the ground up. I'm not trying to learn a version that's easier maybe to play, but it's harder to actually perform and get quick, right? Automatic. So that G5 is probably my favorite. I do that a lot. This G add 9, the second one, it basically follows, what if I take not only the D, which is already in the G chord, what if I also add the A from the D chord into the G? So if I do that, I could get D. One of these is the culprit. So anyways, this G has a added, so that's like the 9th of G, which is the same as 2. All this like confusing chord stuff, right? Nomenclature. That's the same as 2. So we call this like G add 9. It doesn't really matter what you call it. I think of it as just like, oh, if I want this sound, and it's the 4 chord in the key of D, right? So I could go that sound, right? And that's really cool. In fact, you can do this little trick with a lot of chords where you kind of keep the 1 chord as intact as possible often and just change the bass note, which can really play the whole song for you. What if I do that to a whole D chord? This is not on the board at all, but I could go D, right? I could play a G if I get creative with my fingering, B minor, A. Now, those are technically not, right? This is D, this is G, no third, G major 9, no third. It's meaningless, right? But it actually, the D chord notes are in the G chord if you build it enough, right? G, B, D, F sharp, A, right? So it's kind of cool. And then we have the B minor, which would be, this would be B minor 7 if we have a D in there. And then the A would be like, this would be like D over A. But you can make a very pretty tune happen by keeping the D chord wholly intact, or doing something like this where you have this A and D kind of becomes the basis for everything, right? You can kind of keep them in everything. So there's G add 9. Finally, G and drop D. Kind of hard to say. Going back down. So now, because this is out, I'm going to show you a way to play G in this drop D. Everything, if we're doing drop D, we're going down a whole step or 2 frets, right? So everything's got to come up 2 frets to compensate. So an easy G in this key, or in this kind of tuning thing, is like a G 5th fret muting the A string. So our 5th fret on thickest, and then muting the A, and then 3rd fret. So that's like a 2-finger G I'm just altering. Right, that's really nice. You could also do, I don't think I have this on here. I don't. But you could move this thinnest to the next string and get that same note. You could even, it's not that hard, it's not too bad. Get good pinky practice, right? To fret both of these. Or you could do this. And I'd probably mute the thinnest if I'm not playing it. You could even include the high A there. We did that like here, right? I could do even a bar here. I don't do that much. What else could I do? That's mainly it. And I use this one too, right? Or this. Kind of get creative, right? Really mix them up. And I can't iterate this enough. You know, it starts like this, like a really left brain thing where you're learning some new sounds. But this is all kind of mixed together in my head, meaning if one category of chords, my subconscious picks whatever I want. And often it kind of blurs the line, or I do, you know, new things I've never done, or use new fingers I've never used, or whatever. Add notes to chords I've never done that, or a specific thing or whatever. So, good to remember. Okay, G and drop D, there's that. A few different options. I'll include all those options on there on the chord diagram. G tenths. So this next one, below my, or above my headstock, or below, depending on my angle. This is getting into an interval called tenths, and I've taught about this a little bit. I'm going to have more videos come out about it. Such a beautiful interval on guitar. A tenth is like a third, so like, in this case on a G chord it'd be like G, G, A, B, right? That's a third, so if you play those together, well, it looks weird right now because of the tuning, but, or here, really bright up there, right? Thirds are so common in our system of harmony. They're the main harmony note sung. A tenth is just taking that, the highest note there, like G, B, and moving the B up an octave. And hopefully this rings a bell, right? This sound. Blackbird by Beatles. Lots of songs use this sound. Right? Super pretty. So you can learn tenths in a key, and then you can actually use them like I just did. But the G 10th specifically, if you take this one and just mess around a little bit, because the open D string sounds great, and I'm kind of here muting the A string as well. So I've got like just 3 notes ringing, and the 2 thinnest are kind of skipped or muted. So I could go like, and I can move this step 2 frets, so you get an extra A, G, right? I can move this actually all the way up to 11 and 12, that's a D. And you could change the shape for some of these other things, but G, this is really cool, and if I'm using this, I probably would be using it in conjunction with other 10ths. So I could go G, A, let's say B minor, G, but it definitely has a cool feel, right? And the harmony is going kind of really, what would be a good term, horizontal or vertical. I don't know which one to say, but the harmony is all moving extremely in the same direction, right? And we have that, also the D in the middle is kind of tying it all together. So 10ths are really cool. You could even take 10ths up the neck eventually. You could do it another way. But they are, in this specific way, they're really nice because the open D there really kind of ties it all together. And I'm just doing thickest on 5th and then 4 on the G. And this is a G major 10th, A major 10th, right? And then we can get into B minor. You could learn how to change it because it's not that, right? You get into, you can lower the 3rd, right? Okay, so there's a G 10th. And then finally a little bonus here for you. On the G, so let's say you're in the key of, or you're in the key of D, drop D, and we don't want to move our hand out of this position for whatever reason, but we want a G chord. So you could just do part of a G chord, and we would call this like G over B, if you're not doing the thickest. So that would sound maybe like this. Let's say I'm using the lower 3rd here, and I'm going into the G over B. So I could go like, something like that, right? So that's really nice. It's enough, right? That little inversion doesn't have to be this. You don't have to have both. You can just have just the B in the bass, right? And all about being close and resonant and smooth. That's what we're focusing on here. So that's the G chord. I'll review really quickly here. So we have G5, that is in standard. I'm just going to this G. I'm not gonna play it right now because I'm in drop D, but G, I can sing that note. So that's great because of the common ring finger. D to G to D, G, D, G, and just playing a 3-finger G chord, right? Sounds really good. The G add 9 is the same idea, only adding this to the G. So again, it will sound like this, but it would be like that in real life, in standard. You can also do this in drop D. You can just compensate and play 5th fret. And I have something in my head, probably if you take apart my brain, would be like, here's the key of D section of Chris's brain, and here's the 4 chord there on the thickest string, and there's the 5, there's the 6, there's 1. There's the 2, the 3. That's the way I think. I don't know if anyone else does. I do think many pro musicians know that at a really good level, though, even if they can't articulate it like this. They know how to get to the sounds they need, right? And they know how to play in drop D and to kind of make it all work. Okay, G and drop D, finally. We get this. You could do focus on the D. You could focus on the thinnest. You could focus on even another note in thinnest. That's all really nice. G 10ths, this is getting into this idea of playing 10ths on thickest string and the G string. On Blackbird, for instance, they're often played on the A string and the B string. But there's an open G in between those that really makes it sound good in the key of G. In this case, we're gonna do thickest and G string. I'm playing 5 and 4, and this is a major shape in the drop D context. And hopefully you can kind of hear that major sound, right? And I can move this around: G, A, D, G, A, B minor, G, E minor. Really, really pretty, right? And I'm this is the main one to know, and if you know that's the third, you can lower this for minor, right? So that will get you maybe some new sounds you've never done, and I love that sound. Some muting, right? A little bit of muting involved. I'm muting the the A string, and I'm muting the two thinnest strings. Kind of with under my fingers and my pinky. There's like all this automatic muting that happens, and I don't even notice it half the time. Okay, cool. So there's tenths, and then finally this G over B is really nice, especially in the key or in drop D. Should have a really quick G chord, really quick 4 chord. Versus, right? You don't always need that huge shift. It's really, really nice actually. A lot of gold is hidden in between the lines here where we don't have to do the full chord, we can just do part of it. Less is always more, almost always. Okay, so now moving on to A. We have our typical A chord, and this is not an easy chord for me to play personally. It's kind of hard for me to get all 3 fingers in there. It's fine, and actually from D, it sounds really nice. If that's the A chord you need, that's the one you need, right? The next one, A sus. This is probably my favorite, where I just keep my finger from D there. So that's just a little bit more subtle, and of course that can go to A, that often wants to. And you can also include, or take off the G string note. This is really nice, right? I really like this sound. Very James Taylor and a lot of other 70s stuff uses this. So we call this like A7 sus, but it's just a good 5 chord. Right, we don't have to have the whole explicit sound. If that's what you want, that's great. But okay, and then A over C sharp, we have this next one here. The C sharp's the important thing here. So in every key, you often have to play these like little things that maybe are a bass line that are walking down from 1 or up to 1, and they invoke the 7. That's the C sharp in this key. So if I'm going 1, 7, right, and I'm playing something C sharp leading to B minor maybe, right, or going the other direction. So the idea here is that you have some kind of A chord, but you include the C sharp, and I'd actually start very simply, like play a D, and maybe move your fingers around, and then mess around with doing the C sharp in the bass, and then you can lead. Right, it's a little bit more advanced, but this is always a mark of a more nuanced harmony on guitar, is like these inversions. All right, even just a bass line like that. All right, I'm just playing these 2 notes from the D, and I could harmonize this for a whole song. Right, like this is not really D, I guess it is D over C sharp, but it's invoking this, right? It's invoking one of the most common chords in all of music, the 5 chord, right? That's a good way to think about harmony. Like, what is this invoking? 1, 4, or 5? And 2, 3, and 6, as I've talked about before in this series, and I will continue to, are related to 1, 4, and 5. They're the kind of other side of it. 1 and 6 go together, 2 and 4, and 3 and 5. That's why the colors are corresponding. Okay, so yeah, that A C sharp, just get that in there with something, right? That might not be quite as beginner friendly, and it's okay. You can do an A chord, you could add the C sharp. There are a couple ways to do that, but having the D on top is really smooth, right? So that's a really common sound. And then finally, A up the neck. This is kind of taking the lead from D up the neck. So we have an open A string. I can do a lot of stuff. I can move an F shape up to 5 and 7. If I was up here and maybe going, if I'm kind of finding some other, like a 1 chord up here, a 4. Right, there's a lot of options here, and then the 5 I can play right there. But take the A shape, move it around a little bit, or move, start with this F, G, A, or you can do it on the thinnest string. There's a little triad. You can kind of mute the D string. can move this shape up from the D lower third, move it up to 9, 10, and 11. There's an A chord, right? And I'm typically not wanting to move this much, but if context demands, I will play the A in a certain way. And again, we're just exploring here. Like the open A is really inviting. We can do quite a lot with it. So yeah, I'll review A real quick here. So the typical A chord, I often don't play a ton. You can even mute. You can kind of, you could exclude some notes and maybe mute or something. I do that some. I probably play this second one the most. A sus4, A sus for short, or A7 sus. Again, this is just another kind of 5 chord to me in this key, right? A over C sharp, that would be getting something from like this 7 in there somehow. So 1, 7, 6, or we could do 1, 7. That's okay. That's a little weaker. I kind of like, honestly, I kind of like that. Just keeping a D. And then we have the A. Instead of going to A, we can hit that C sharp. This is often going to B minor, right? Which happens a lot. And then A up the neck, where we take some of these voicings and move them around a little bit. So maybe I take this D chord, I move it up to A, which would be 9, 10, 11. You have to figure out where that root is, right? And use your ear too. And this is also goes into note naming on the fretboard, of course. I can manage this whole song based on that sound. Beautiful, right? I can even go off script, play chords outside of the key. Right? It's really cool to get exploratory here. A also you could do on thinnest. Right? You can even find probably a voicing that uses 4. That's not a good voicing, but you could find something that uses 4 thinnest for an A chord, and then you have the A open. Like you just use a D shape, right? So I could have something, and I could find, right, a D chord up here, A chord up here, G chord, and I want that bass though, right? So that is something we'll talk more about. Is we really don't want to abandon the bass too much. I'm approaching these from like getting the essence of a song or getting really smooth chords with a really clear bass, which is the most important note, right? Hopefully this has been helpful. I'm gonna go and leave it here. Next time I'll be back with 2, 3, and 6 of this key, which would be E minor, F sharp minor, and B minor. I'm hoping these videos are helpful for fleshing out your understanding of, or fleshing out, I think it's fleshing out, your understanding of numbers and the key of D and playing guitar in general, right? Getting some sounds that it took me many years to find sometimes. And so much experimentation, and I'm going to give them to you for free. So check out the chord diagram in the description and the other videos in this series, and I will have some more keys coming up. I'm going to probably do key of E next. And again, let me know if there's any cool chords you like playing. You can write them down in frets, like thickest to thinnest. So like this chord in that notation would be open, open, 4, 2, 3, open, or open, open, 4, 2, 3, X. Right? Really good to be able to think of chords like that too. And I challenge you, take some of these chords that really resonate with you and get them into your fingers and your ears and try to daydream about them when you're going to sleep, right? We're really trying to get our brain, everything kind of working together here to enable these intuitions and new possibilities. So, okay, I will see you next time. Take care.